All right, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Future Ear Radio podcast. Today I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Mike Andreozzi. Mike, how you doing today? Thanks for coming on the show.
Doing great, David. I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So wanted to have you on. You've had a rather illustrious career, with your Beltone franchise. And, I think you're one of the most, one of the best success stories of, that I've encountered within this industry. So wanted to have you on and just let you kind of tell the story of how, the Andreozzi family built your franchise and we can talk through some of the lessons learned along the way, knowing that there's probably people out there that could learn a lot from you. So why don't we just go back to the start? You can walk me through how your family kind of wound up in this line of work.
Yeah, great. And again, great to be here, Dave. And I think what's so amazing about our profession that we're in is that there's so many great stories and so many great people in it. And I think one of the things that makes me love the profession so much is the relationships you develop with so many people along the way. It's like one big family organization. And that's really kind of my story too, in some respect, coming from kind of the large Italian family in Rhode Island. My father, Rocco Andreozzi, was 90 years old, still alive and well and doing it pretty amazing. It's funny how he got in the hearing aid space. He was actually shoveling. It was a bad snowstorm in Rhode Island. He was shoveling his driveway and he noticed across the street that there was an older gentleman that was struggling to shovel his driveway. He went across the street and started helping that gentleman without asking him, just to clear his driveway. And the gentleman said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm just trying to help you shovel your driveway." He goes, "Well, I'm not going to pay you to do this." He goes, "You don't have to pay me. I'm just trying to be helpful." The gentleman said, "Well, that's really interesting. You would do that for someone?" He said, "Yes." And he goes, "You know something? I'm in the hearing aid business, and I think you'd be great in this business because we help people and don't always expect a lot in return, but it's all about giving back." And that's really what kicked off. My dad went into interview with a gentleman named E.J. McElroy from Rhode Island, who owned a small company called Community Hearing Aid Centers. My dad went in and interviewed with him. He was working at the A&P supermarket as a struggling father of a few kids at the time, way back when. And he got into the hearing aid space that way through helping someone through a challenge. And my dad was perfect for the business in a sense that he loved helping people. He loved developing relationships. And someone who didn't have a tremendous amount of education, this was a good field at the time back in the 60s to get involved in at the time. And so he became active in that business and worked for Community Hearing Aid Center for quite a while, and ended up buying the business from Mr. McElroy. But as a kid, I'm one of 6 children. I'm number 5 or 6 kids. All of us, all my brothers and sisters at some point, were in the business somehow, whether we worked on the weekends with my dad or just went to the office with him. Probably no different than you, David, with your business with Oak Tree. But with me, I have 2 older brothers who are both doctors. One was an audiologist. Didn't like audiology. Had a hard time selling hearing aids in the 70s for $500. So my dad said, "Well, lower it to $475." He still couldn't sell them, so he became a family doctor. So it wasn't his racket. My other brother Mark's an third doctor today, very successful, pretty amazing guy, and worked for my dad for a while. My sister Kim worked with me and through the hearing aid business for quite a while with my dad, and just recently retired. My other sibling, Victoria, worked for a little while. My brother, Eric, was the smart one and became the investment banker. Really never did much with the business except help with some accounting systems. But me, I was always passionate about it for whatever reason. As a young kid, I would go into the office with my dad and on weekends or at nights and sell batteries at the front desk as a teenager. At the time, we started doing a significant amount of marketing. We had this old, clunky mechanical machine called an addressograph machine, which was in the basement of one of our main office. And I used to go down there and run these plates through the machine at 14 years old and print out all of the monthly newsletter we called the Sound Facts that we'd ship out to 10,000 people every month. And that was my job as a teenager, but being around the office and seeing patients and seeing the other people in the office, it just became part of who I was to be around it so much. So I always had that interest for sure. When I was 18 years old and just graduated from high school, I passed the hearing aid dispensing license in Rhode Island. So I was the youngest hearing aid dispenser license in the state. and then went out to college, the University of Rhode Island, where I started studying communicating disorders, hearing and speech, and also speech communications. But going through college, I still worked for my dad every single, I'd say 3-4 days a week, fitting hearing aids while I was going to college. I used to sell hearing aids at people's homes. I used to work in the office. So it was just embedded in me so much that this business was something that I really was passionate about. I love the people that we took care of. I love the gratification we got when you changed people's life, even back in those days where technology was so primitive that it only moved the needle a little bit, but even that little bit was pretty good. But I was always somebody who was technical and liked the electronic aspect, but I could explain it to people so it was very simple for them to understand. So that I think that made me somewhat unique in the space, and really just kind of loved it. But what really kind of set me up to be kind of next level, I think, within the space is that my dad was one of the original Miracle Air franchises back in 1985 when Miracle Air was just franchising. He was one of the top first 10 people to sign a franchise agreement when Miracle had decided to franchise within the space. And when I graduated from college in 88, doing the 5-year fraternity plan, I might add, the best year was that last year. But I really, at that point, started really diving into the space much deeper. And what I mean by that is that Miracle had a management training program that I attended when I was a young person. Learned so much. It was a week-long training program in Golden Valley, Minnesota. Learned so much about running a business. What was the metrics back then to make it work with the telemarketing aspects of it that we used to use back then, the sales training, the sales management stuff. And that kind of really layered on to what I learned when I was a teenager, when I went to Hal Fishbein's sales training program when I was 16 years old with my father, and attended Roy Bain's sales training programs, and Frank Ring at Starkey's sales training program. So as a young kid, I saw all this. And then when I got to Miracle Air, it kind of clicked with me in a sense that this was a very structured franchise program that I had never seen before, that had a lot of really smart people in it who had just got into it. So I had these incredible mentors at an early age, my 20s, early 20s, people like Ed Alio and Don Gross and Don Ellsworth. And it's funny, Rick Frazier and I, who was the big Miracle Air, him and I started exactly the same time at Miracle Air. So, and there was Jeff Dahlberg and Ken Dahlberg. This Miracle Air thing was so unique because of their lead generation program. The people that they had involved in it was pretty magical. And they kind of treated it like a big family business in some sense, even though it was a large franchise system. And the systems they taught, I really enjoyed. And said that when we were trying to grow a business, keeping things simple, I think, was the most important thing. So one of the things that came out of that was that we sold one line of products. It was only Miracle Air at the time. Our pictures were 72 inches off the wall. They were 3 feet apart. They were all the same pictures. The furniture was all the same color and ordered from the same company. The carpeting and in the store was very, all the same. So all our stores in a franchise environment all looked the same. It made it very simple to then scale if you wanted to scale because all the systems are in place. And I really kind of liked that for one big part of me. And I really liked what Miracle Air was doing as far as their sales training, inspiring people, inspiring leaders, getting people together on a regular basis. They were really ahead of their curve. And then, they started something that really special. I mean, everybody in the industry at the time would have people walk in their office if they weren't a Miracle Air dealer, and people walk in and say, I want that little Miracle Air one. That became like the Coca-Cola of the hearing industry back then because it was an incredible lead generation program. But, what was interesting is Miracle Air then sold the business to Bausch Lomb. So Bausch Lomb purchased the business from them back in the early 90s for a substantial amount of money. And Bausch Lomb, being an eye care company out of Rochester, New York, really felt like, hey, listen, we can take what we know in optics and optical and turn and layer this into the hearing aid space and kind of make this go, a large scale, because everyone thought that the hearing aid business should be a lot larger. What they found out was that hearing aids weren't sexy. Nobody wanted them. They cost too much money, and people will put them off buying them for years and years, versus eyeglasses or sunglasses where they were sexy looking. People wanted them. They made them look younger, and they were appealing. So they were convinced they could take that optical mentality, applying it to the hearing aid space. But boy, did they run into some roadblocks. In the 4 years after Bausch Lomb bought it, I saw 5 different presidents from Bausch Lomb, all from optical industry, come in and try to run the hearing aid division. And that was just frustrating. It was really frustrating in the sense that I just really didn't align with any of the people who were trying to run the business, because everyone at Miracle at that time was so hearing aid minded. You had these outsiders coming in trying to change the whole philosophy of it. Ultimately, it didn't work. Bausch Lomb had to sell it at a yard sale kind of to Amplifon, with the Italians who got into the space at that time. And I had already exited. I exited Miracle. I just really didn't like the management team that was there at that point. It's kind of funny because a year later, after Amplifon bought it, they called me and said, "Hey, Andreozzi, you're the only Italian that we see with a vowel in your name. Why did you leave the company?" So that was a whole other conversation.
That's funny.
But it was interesting, in my perspective, to see something that was going really good, and then something, and how fast it could change. And really, a lot of people at that time in Miracle Air exited out of the Miracle Air business because they didn't like the culture. They didn't like the message from above. And you had this machine that was so well oiled, and many, many people leaving it. So it was a great lesson for me in a business perspective to see, how you could mess something up. And I said to myself that that's something that is not going to happen to me if I grow my business, because culture, family, promises, all those things that are really important in a business when you're trying to grow it are so important. A lot of those are broken, and it just didn't feel right. So that's I exited the Miracle business like in about 98, and then I became multi-line for a while with Siemens and Starkey, and worked really close with those companies. They were great. They were, going back to multi-line business was fine. Had some great relationships there, but that's when I first encountered Beltone in 2001. They had approached me with an opportunity, and they had been Beltone had been sold to GN, no different than Miracle had been sold to Bausch Lomb. Well, GN bought this Beltone business and really kind of messed it up, to be honest with you. They went from doing a lot of hearing aids to about 50% of that volume because of the company that came in changed the whole philosophy of how the business was working, broke up that kind of family momentum, if you will. And you had all these Beltone dealers exit, and went to Audible, or they went to a multi-line practice, or they went elsewhere. And it was really a catastrophe. And in 2001, when Beltone approached me, they were really down and out. They had one of their larger dealers in Florida who had just left them and left a disaster in Florida. They kind of hired me as a private consultant to come back in and try to open up some stores in Florida to combat what happened. And I did it. And I opened 6 stores in 5 months in Florida, 2 days a week, flying back and forth, and hired the staff, put people in place, built up the offices, got it up and running, literally across the street from all those stores that I had just abandoned the Beltone system. It was kind of a message, if you will. And it went so well, the folks at Beltone said, "Hey, we'd love to work with you at a larger capacity." And that kind of kicked off my Beltone world, because they came to me and said, "Listen, we're going to do the first concept we've ever thought of. It's called a mega dealer. We want you to be our first mega dealer." I said, "Well, what is a mega dealer?" Well, there was still, I think they were still designing what it was, but at the time, in the New England marketplace, they had a lot of Beltone folks that had exited as well. And they wanted to open up a lot of stores in a short period of time. So basically, I signed an agreement with them to be partners with them on a new business to open up, 25 stores in 5 years, which were very ambitious plans at the time. So we did that. So we went back and we did that in less than 2.5 years. It didn't take 5 years. We did it really fast. We did it by scaling a lot of the things I had learned. And what was interesting to me is when you come into a business that you don't know a lot about. I didn't know a lot about Beltone at the time. I thought they were just like what I left at Miracle Air, which was more of a franchise system, which would be colors, pictures, carpeting, a distinct retail model. Well, the Beltone message or program at the time was more a distributorship model, not a franchise. And that's the big difference in the businesses that we see today, the businesses you deal with, David, Oaktree, is that some of them are structured so that they have a similar pattern in each one of the office locations they have. Others, they let them go. So at the time, Beltone was something that really didn't have a true image across the board. There were some offices that were old and just needed to be done over. There were some newer ones. There was stuff in between. So when I came into Beltone, one of my missions was right away is we're gonna cookie cut this. We're gonna design a program, an office look, an image, whole culture around it. And that's what we were able to do in our New England stores in a short period of time. In fact, it was so special that people were calling to come work for us because we were building beautiful offices. We were doing great advertising, marketing. We had a great reputation with the teams out there, the people that worked for us, that came aboard with us. And they wanted to be part of it because whenever you start a business and you get something going, people want to be part of something special. We live in this world of, in this industry that it's kind of can be a boring industry. You work by yourself in an office. It might be you and your patient care coordinator, and that's it. You might have a manager or somebody working in an office, but that's you got four walls around you. You have to find a way to continually stimulate people, get them excited about coming to work, make them feel part of a mission that that you have going on as well. And that was something that we were able to do at a very, very, I'd say, large scale. And that was because we would meet with our teams on a regular basis. Every month we had a staff meeting, no matter how big we got. We'd fly them in if we had to on a regular basis. We would have sales contests. We would have ways of communicating outside of that monthly meeting, but in person it was important. We would eat together. I would make myself so available to learn about the people that worked for me. I wanted to know about them. I wanted to know about their spouse. I wanted to know about their family. I would be out to dinner 2-3 times a week with different people that worked for me just to understand what they were all about. So then I could design a custom program for them, whether it was an incentive program or sales program that suited their needs, that was very special to them. And we were good at that. And that people felt connected with the organization that way versus just cookie cutter, everything out there. So that was really big. So I would say I took my family, my background in an Italian family of loving people, showing them love with food, being great to be with them and making sure they felt important. And I applied that to the business we were growing. And I think that really worked, very, very well, not only with the staff, but our management team and everyone around it. We grew this thing really big, fast, Dave. It was really amazing how it all went from just 3 offices that I kind of took from in 2001 and made that, we grew that to over 125 stores over those years. And we did it in 10 different states. And a lot of the people that kind of helped me do it were the folks that worked for me at my Beltone office that became managers and then became partners in some of these areas as well. So everybody had a hearing aid background. I was very persistent in the fact that anyone was going to come work for us had to work in hearing aid office for a while, had to learn the business for a while, had to know what it's like to sit in that chair, to know what it's like to deal with the patients we deal with, because that is not an easy thing. For you to dictate that from above and not ever actually have the position within it, it's unfortunate because it's important that you understand those things. So those are some of the things that we did. We took that small family business, made a larger business through scaling and by using kind of, great family values in that regard.
Well, one thing I want to just jump in here is, I feel like we've kind of seen this time and time again where you have the some sort of outside large entity comes in, says, I have this grand plan for how we're going to just completely, expand and reimagine hearing healthcare. And I feel like you probably had a firsthand witness into all of this time and time again. It seems to fail. And so I think to your point, the most successful people I've ever come across within this industry seem to be the ones that are most deeply immersed into it. They really understand intuitively how this works, what some of the inherent challenges are. And so I just think it's interesting to hear that this dates all the way back to, the days when Miracle was first bought. And I'm sure there were other shades of this that went on, but I mean, we're still seeing this today. where, now you have like consumer electronics companies that are coming in and they're just assuming that, oh, this is such an easy challenge to solve. It's a technological challenge that we need to solve or something like that. And there's just so much more to it. And it's interesting to just kind of see this same pattern time and time again play out.
It's so true. And the history really teaches us lessons for sure. What we do with those lessons is really determines what we're going to do in our business. So you got to pay close attention to those history lessons. And I know what's happening within the profession today is no different. That there's a race to find a way to own some of the retail, and because the retail is really where the rubber meets the road. The reality is that's true, but the most challenging part of our profession is the retail side of it. Learning audiology and retail. How can you scale at any size hearing aid retail or audiology practice so that you can do it in a successful way? It's easy to buy at stores, and we see it all the time. We just saw Alpaca and Phonak make a deal recently. Hearing Life continues to buy stores. I bought lots and lots of stores over the years, but what I noticed was that when we started growing and getting large, when we started getting to be a bigger business, I looked around, and what I saw there was nobody out there anywhere near our size at the time. We were really the largest practice around. And I think we kind of motivated some other folks to become, look at this on a larger scale and say, hey, maybe we can grow a business. Well, we just kept our eyes on the road and did our thing and used those values that as I was saying to you, which is about your people and the culture. You cannot buy a culture. A culture comes from within. When you develop a culture, then it's contagious. So you have to find a way to develop a culture that works for you. Everyone's different. Everyone's got a different fingerprint. I just sold my business recently, as you know, and the person that bought it, Brian Snowden, who was wonderful, his fingerprint's going to be different than mine. He'll find a way to keep that culture that's really important to him. If you're a large manufacturer and have, you're part of hundreds and hundreds of retail stores that you own today, it's really difficult for the organization, for the people that work for you to feel connected with you in some kind of way. And it takes a special art form that sometimes it's hard to explain how to do in order to do it. And there's some people that do it really magically, and there's others who just do it the wrong way and they treat it like a very large corporate entity. And people just don't like that within our profession. Our businesses don't run that way because at the end of the day, it's still a business. It's a people business, one-on-one. And what happens in all those stores is between the hearing care professional and the patient across the table. And if that hearing care professional doesn't believe in the organization they're with and all the values they have and the products and stuff, then it's going to get lost in translation, and the sales will just not dictate that. So I think it's really important that you develop certain things within your business that make you unique. And we had so many of those things in our business that made us unique and have fun with, that people today still talk about, that they have a good time. I got one example, it's a great one, is that when I used to go out and visit our stores, the first thing I would do is I would go to the restroom, the bathroom in the office, and I would make sure it was perfect. I would make sure that the bathroom was absolutely spotless, like you'd be proud of it, like it would be in your own home. And I would take pictures of the bathroom and I would then tweet it, or I would email it to my whole team and say, hey, I was in Brookfield, Connecticut today, and this is what their bathroom looks like. And that whole thing, and I was very serious about that, because I think if you go to a restaurant, hotel, whatever, the bathroom sets the whole presence for the rest of the place. If the bathroom's clean, then the kitchen's probably clean, or the rest of the room's clean. Same thing in a hearing aid office. It should be just as important that if someone uses your restroom and it's beautiful, then they know you have attention to detail, that this is important thing. So that little silly thing just amplified such a large level. When I went into offices to visit them, unexpected sometimes, or expected, the first thing they would do is says, Mike, you need to go check out our bathroom. It's spotless. They couldn't wait to show me their bathrooms. And it was true. And today, if you walk in those bathrooms, they're always spotless. We took it to a next level. We had a contest about who could decorate their toilet paper dispenser the fanciest, just like you would see at a Ritz-Carlton or something like that. And people would come up with these flowers and designs. And I would go in and kind of rate some of those things. It would sound silly and funny, but it made it kind of like something special for them to do. They would take pictures of it, send it to the other people. They would take pride in their office. Just simple things like that were so important. There's other things you can do, but That was one of the funniest ones, I think.
I love
Still,
that.
it applies today. Yeah.
I do. I think though that, something I've really learned from you is the, how were you so successful? Well, I think one of the, common denominators is your attention to detail. And like you said, is fostering a really good culture. And I think that those things are they're kind of wildly dismissed as just sort of like afterthoughts, but clearly you did something right. And I just think that those kinds of things in aggregate, they add up to something where it does actually make a difference in the patient's eyes. And we're talking about, the business, this whole business is more or less a competition of the experience that you're providing the patient, and you want that patient, I think you can attest to this more than anyone, is like, going back to the days when you were working with your dad, I can only imagine what the hearing aids were like back then. So you had to stand apart in some way. And I think it's a lot of this stuff. It's the company culture, it's the attention to detail, and then it's obviously the way in which you interact with the patient and that experience that you're facilitating and creating continuity and consistency with that you can then scale, I think is what really makes this thing, what makes it tick.
It does. It's a good remembrance, what you just brought up with my dad. As a young guy coming to the office, when I was really watching my dad, what he was doing, and I worked with him in the office and stuff, I can remember, you're going to think this is crazy, but I can remember him bringing in certain foods and dishes for certain patients. I'm telling you, there was a couple patients who loved his veal and peppers, for example. He would make sure that he cooked those that night or the day before. He'd bring in, and that patient would be in there, and they'd say, "Hey, I made you some of my veal and peppers." And the patients thought it was the greatest thing in the world. His seafood risotto, his pasta, his all these little food things, which were so important in my life and my family. But he would give those to patients, certain patients, and he kept these little index cards on every patient. This is before computers. And he would, profile them, like what their dog's name was, where they like to go on vacation, their favorite food. And before that day, he would brief himself on all those things. So he was so prepared down to the food, which was crazy. And I found myself doing it when I was a private dispenser for a long time, doing similar things. And even in my own practice, when, again, the whole aura of being brought up the way I was, food was the number one thing. And, that Sunday I would cook meatballs and sausages and strawberries and pasta and all stuff. That's how Meatball Monday began in our office.
I was going to ask about Meatball Monday.
Yeah. I would cook like a crazy man on Sunday, not because I had to, just because I loved it. It made the house smell so wonderful. And all that food, which was my wife and my daughter, and they thought I was crazy, I would bring all that food to our corporate office. We had about 30 people in our corporate office. And the phone people, the call center, all the managers, all accounting, finance, all the operations folks. And I would bring all that food in on Monday. And that's how Meatball Monday became a real big thing in our culture within our organization. And literally, we had management meetings at 9:00, and people would be eating meatballs, drinking coffee, which became actually normal in our business, which was funny. But some people would think we're crazy. And then we would send, I post pictures of the meatball doing something at Beltone and how that was part of our culture. And then every staff meeting we always had to have meatballs. And then people wanted my meatballs. And then if they won, we'd have sales meetings where if you won, certain sales, I would deliver the meatballs to your office and make a big deal out of it. And people would go crazy just to win that contest for me to come up and deliver the meatballs. So, and that's turned into kind of a life of itself, the whole meatball thing. Because now we do meatball reviews, and it's a whole funny thing. But again, back to something different, something unique. I know that a lot of vendors, like an Oak Tree, or all the marketing companies used to come visit us on a regular basis. They would try to come on Mondays so they could have meatballs, which was really funny. And a lot of them would actually kind of imitate it or kind of duplicate in what we did, where they had food, a lot of times it was meatballs, brought into their offices on Monday, thinking that, that was a good cultural thing. And it worked for so many people that they knew that the owners cared about it. For me, that was a way for me to show the love of my team through food. And, and that was just something that came natural to me. But, I had so many people that worked for us come to our house for dinner with my family to get to know me and me to get to know them, taking them out boating, taking them out golfing. Too many people, I think, just expect if you have a job, it's a job. it's not just a job. It's about really getting to know the people that work for you. So to your point, when they're in the office working for you, they know there's a mission there. There's more than just a job. They're there because there's a purpose to it. And I really feel that's kind of the missing art form in our profession today, finding a way to duplicate that, in some way.
Yeah, I think like just from my personal standpoint, it is all kind of the little things, I think, and it's creating a company culture. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that's something that my parents really installed here, was the sense of camaraderie, that there's a common goal. We're very transparent with where we are as a business. Every single day we write the sales number during our morning meeting, and we just kind of talk about what happened in the previous day, which is something that I learned about from you recently, that you mentioned that you do these, kind of like thoughts from Mike, or you write you kind of chronicle, like, here's keeping a finger on a pulse, which I think is an amazing leadership method, I guess, if you will, to capture kind of like what's going on in your head. And I'm a big fan of putting my thoughts to paper as well. And I think that that's a great way to communicate on a routine basis with your team, to just kind of keep them in the know of like, here's what I'm sensing, here's what I'm seeing. And I imagine that that's fostered a ton of great dialogue. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the communication is the key of an organization, making sure that you're connected with those people. So when you get to a large scale of a lot of offices, and you're across different states, and you can't see everybody on a regular basis, which to a guy like me drives me crazy. So I'm so touchy-feely about trying to get to know people. But leveraging it electronically now is very possible, no different than what we're doing right now. But one of the things first thing we did is we had our a Beltone Today show, which was every Monday morning, 8:30 in the morning. We had our Beltone Today, and that was a live broadcast from our headquarters in Warwick, Rhode Island. It would go out to 260 employees, and it was like that. I kind of copied it from the Today Show, basically, NBC. It was a half hour. It was compact. It was just short snippets, but we'd be live broadcasts. We built a small little studio in Rhode Island, and we do it just like we're doing here. I would have a segment of it. Brian would have a segment of it. Our sales VP, Doug Kay, would do a piece of it. Our VP of marketing, Tisha Williams, she would do a piece of it, or whatever. We might have some of our staff members who've had some great success stories in the field in front of patients, share some stories. So that was something that was done every week, that everyone was expected to be there. And if you were late, I was literally pissed off, because I felt like, listen, if you're sign up for this job and I ask you for a half hour a week to make it there, and we would log everybody in. If they were late, I would call them. The next, within an hour after the meeting, say, why were you late? This is the one thing I asked you to do. Be respectful of it. And, I didn't ask a lot from a lot of people. I asked them to watch this because it was so important to me that they understood the pulse of what's going on in the organization. So that was one thing we did, I think fairly well in that broadcast. The other thing is, I had something called Thursday News and Notes, which was a kind of a 1-page or 2-page newsletter I would write every single week, and I still do today, which was something that was really what's the pulse going on within the profession and the industry. What's going on in OTC? Who's making moves on it? What new products are being released within the industry? Whether, obviously we're a Beltone practice, but I was very interested to know what was going on in Phonak or Starkey, Optical, all those great companies that are out there. What's going on? So we knew when patients came in and mentioned some of those things, my team was well aware of it. And then just some thoughts and philosophies about motivating our team on a sales from a sales standpoint, about life, about reflection, about, who you are. And so when we announced at the Beltone conference about a month and a half ago that I had sold my business to Brian, I would share this newsletter with all the other Beltone owners. And I must have had 50 of them come up to me and said, please tell me you're still going to do the news and notes section, because we share that information with our teams, with our staff. That's real important to us. And one of the things that I've been able to do now after selling my business is to, take over this position with Beltone part-time as they call it, a brand ambassador, which is basically I'm working part-time for Beltone to help build the brand and build the name of the company and bring some more people in and give some guidance to the management team about how the owners and operators out there work. That's when we get a kind of correlation in a positive way, which is going really well. But we're continuing doing those Thursday news and notes things, because it's important. I don't think there's anyone really out there that I know of that is kind of doing that kind of stuff to their teams to keep them informed, to keep them in line with what's going on, to keep them motivated about it. Again, communications is so critically important. We can over communicate, but let's make sure we communicate properly, that hits certain highlights with people, that gets them excited about coming into their office and stuff like that. Again, I repeat this a few times. It's a lonely job being a hearing dispenser. And I think it gets overlooked. It really does.
Do you have
Finding a way to keep them tied in is important.
Do you have a preferred setting that you like to write your newsletter or your 2-pager? Is it like in your backyard? Are you a creature of habit, or do you just kind of do it different wherever you are?
I can as the week goes on, I kind of compile some bullet points of things that I see. And I'm all about life experiences. I'm the kind of guy that goes out of his way to find a great experience and then write about that experience. It could be a hotel, it could be an airline person, it could be somebody just buying a coffee and me watching it across the table for somebody. So I get these ideas in all different ways, shapes, and forms in all different professions and industries, and try to apply it. I do have to be sitting in front of my computer. Like I'm coming to you from Florida today, so I had the sun's in my head here. But I do have to be sitting in front of my computer and kind of dialed in and have kind of a clear thought process. If there's other things going on, it's distracting to me at times. So this is the one time during the week I try to clear my head and think through it. And then I try to find something that applies to everybody, no matter what scale of the business you're in. If you're in the management team, if you're a front office assistant, if you're in a call center, if you're a practitioner or dispenser of hearing aids, no matter who you are, something that I think that would apply and that you would find interesting in some respect to your life in some way. So those are the things I look for. And there's so many great things out there that you can gather, but I try to gather myself. I try to really find things that happen to me and then I can apply to other people, because I think a lot of them are just overlooked a lot of times. And, one other thing I want to mention, Dave, is talking about being unique and different and special. The other thing that I think really attracted people to us to come work for us is that we weren't afraid to try things that no one else was doing. For example, we started incorporating the jitterbug phone in our hearing aid practices 10, 12 years ago, where we actually sold a jitterbug cell phone in our offices that would attract an older adult into the office, and then we could talk to them about hearing care. I had a partner in that business. We ended up being in 1,400 locations across the country, outside the box thinking, a vertical. I was involved in the 3D laser scanner company, 3D Systems, which got sold to Resound and get sold again. But ear scanning, unique, different, something you can capitalize on. We were the first company in the United States that starting distributing or making available caption call phones in our offices with caption call. No one had really incorporated that into hearing in office. We were, when they allowed marketing of that, we were the first of its kind to kind of do stuff like that. And then trying to apply, some of the AI technology that's available today to really look at your data. That's one of the things that, Brian, who I sold my business to, he is a brilliant guy. And one of the things that he really is fantastic with is looking at data and applying it to what we can do to make our businesses better. So we found really some very interesting points in some of our data and then layered it with some other outside things to kind of help with our marketing, advertising, and stuff like that. And then we even put robots in our offices. So we had these Beam robots, which we'd use as front office assistants. We had 3 of them, and we'd ship them to different subs. Someone's going to be away for a week, and we didn't have any PCC in that office. We'd ship this robot that was on wheels, that had a screen, to that office, and that office robot would become the front office assistant. A sister clinic could run it, and that wouldn't interrupt the hearing care professional in the room. Every time someone opened the door, the robot would talk to the person, interact with them, and it was someone else's space, a PCC from. So we did all these out-of-box thinking to do things, but people who worked for us thought it was just tremendous and thought it was different, and they loved it. So, I really stress to anyone out there who's trying to grow the business, find things that are unique, that are different, that other people haven't thought of, and incorporate your people into some of the thinking along the same lines, and get them thinking about it, because they'll think about it for the company rather than themselves, or you thinking about it for yourself. They're thinking about it on a larger scale, how can I make the company better? And I think that's something that's really important these days.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So with the, kind of thinking back on your career up to this point, knowing that there's probably some people listening to this that just have a lot of career left in them, and they're probably going to fail and learn a lot just like you did. What are some lessons that you've learned that really stick out in your mind, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as somebody that's just operated in this industry for as long as you have? Um, what kind of comes to mind with maybe some things that others could avoid if they were to just if you could impart that wisdom upon them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the number one thing that comes to my mind is just what your God-given abilities are as far as what you think you could do with your practice. If you're a practice owner and you have one or two or three locations, what have you, and you have the ambition to open a large scale organization with 10 or 15 or 20 offices, you have to you have to look in the mirror closely and really understand what abilities you have as it relates to multitasking, about how you are with people skills and people persons and problem solving. The number one thing is how good of a problem solver you are and not being reactionary. And I think I see it too often in too many people, that people think they're good problem solvers, but they're, a lot of times they cause a whole stir of things that occur, and it ends up messing up the environment and the people that are working with you. So that's a big one. But you need to be able to have the ability to really rate how much of a person you are to be able to do something like. One of the things you and I talked about a while ago was that, I have this kind of crazy God-given ability. If I meet somebody in the hearing aid space and I spend 10 minutes with them, a number appears in my head over on their forehead. And that number is basically how many offices I think they can operate successfully in the hearing aid space and be good at it. And, there's numbers that could start at 1 and they'll go past 1. And there's others that can go to, 25, 50, or 100, depending on the person. It takes that special person. So I'd say make sure that you know what your abilities are, because I think today a lot of manufacturers will give you the money to grow your business at a large scale. But what good is that if you're setting yourself up for failure? And I know too many people have done that. So you have to make sure that you have the abilities. Let me try to get out of the sun. You have the abilities to be able to be that person that can do it at a larger scale. Then you just have to understand the people you surround yourself with, because in order to do anything at a larger scale, you definitely have to have great people around you that think like you, that might even be smarter than you. In most cases, they should be. They have skill sets that you don't possess. Because I know someone like me, an entrepreneurial mind, there's a lot of you guys out there right now and girls out there that have this entrepreneurial mind. You don't like the details sometimes. Sometimes you just like the visionary thinking that goes along with it. Well, the details are important. You have to have a mix of that. Or you have to have someone by your side that can fill in those blanks to make sure that you can, you don't bankrupt the company in a year. You have to be able to balance things out quickly. The other thing is, I think you have to find what things within people, what skill sets people have that you can really kind of hitch your wagon to. So you might meet some people within your organization that you kind of had, I would say segmented for something within your group. Then you find out that's really not what they're best at, but they can do something else a little bit different or at a much larger scale and better. Then find a way to incorporate that into what they're doing, because that's going to make them more excited, make them more comfortable, make you more successful for sure. The other thing is just having a vision for anything you're doing. So when you want to start a business within this profession and get it larger, you need to have a mission statement for what you're doing. You need to have kind of to develop what I like to call an operating system. We at Beltone, New England, in North Carolina, and Florida, and New York, and all the different areas we use something called the EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And that was a book that was Brian Stoner read by a gentleman called Gino Wickman. And that book was really a catalyst to our business, because we were growing, and then we came flat for a while, and we couldn't seem to get off that plateau. Well, after we got involved in the entrepreneurial operating system, then we brought an outside consultant in who was part of this whole thing. And he worked with us for a few years and really identified strengths and weaknesses within our organization and try to find a way for us to get up to it. And after that period, we grew again at a large scale. So making sure you design an operating system for your business that has, ability to scale up and get larger in some respects as well. And then just the other thing is just being able to be good at recognizing what's for people and understanding what's good in some people. I think that's a lost art form, Dave, today.
I was going to say that the thing that kind of like really resonates throughout all of that is people. And I think that, one of the things that I really took away from AAA, like there were two big macro themes that seemed to kind of be in every discussion. One was TPAs, third-party insurance. That's just a giant elephant in the room. But the other is staffing. And I think that, and it's all different types, it's from audiologists to hearing instrument specialists to front office staff, there's just a shortage, and it's like, I think that people are really struggling with this. And it, throughout this whole conversation, this is kind of something that's just been lingering in the back of my mind, which is people are so important in both finding the right types of people and then identifying what those people should be doing, and focusing on that so that you're not necessarily putting them in a role that they're not really well suited for, or you're not giving people the opportunity to elevate. Because I think that that's probably a solution to a lot of people's challenges, is that you need to grow and cultivate, your own workers in a way that you can upskill them, because it's so hard to find people today. It seems like that are good workers and are suited to do the kinds of things that I think a lot of people are looking for. So again, I think it just totally reinforces this notion of you got to have a really good company culture. You got to create a place that people feel like they're part of a broader mission. It's not just about themselves. And how do you foster that kind of environment? I just feel as if everything that you've said and talked about throughout this whole conversation resonates more than ever today, when it's, we're kind of living in a time now where we don't have the luxury where there's all of this labor readily available. I think people are really challenged with that. And so I think that this is a lot of what you've been talking about, even though it might seem sort of just like, oh, of course, that's common knowledge. I need to make sure that I hire the right people, and I need to make sure that I'm cultivating leadership and all that. It's, I think, way, way harder done than said.
It is, and I think what's interesting, one of the things that I would say was a very impactful finding that we've had in the last few years of bringing people on within the hearing profession. For example, when you want to bring on some new hearing care practitioners, obviously the audiologists are out there and there's some great ones, but there's not enough for them coming into the field to satisfy the growth of the industry. So the AUD thing's really kind of has funneled it to a point where it's just challenging. So hearing care professionals is really the largest growing aspect of the field. I know I'm the incoming president of the International Hearing Aid Society and really passionate about what we do at IHS. And one of the things is, how do we grow that? How do we bring more people in? And I know from my own business standpoint is that because we could not bring people who were already licensed within the field, man, bring them from the outside in, we were really successful with people from the cell phone industry because they had a tremendous, experience with dealing with customer service. We were really successful with people who worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, for example, who had that really great management training, and it was a BSc kind of thing, which was really good. We did not do well finding people in the pharmaceutical industry, for example. I'll tell you why. You have a lot of people who were getting laid off from pharmaceutical jobs who were high-end professionals who had a lot of experience, but they were always B2B. They were always dealing with the owner of a doctor. They were representing a pharmaceutical company or a medical device company. They were dealing with the owner of the practice, what have you. When we put those people in front of consumers, they were never very good at it. Now, there's exceptions to that rule. I'm going to say that, okay? But the vast majority was not successful for us. Those folks ended up being more in the manufacturing side, doing B2B kind of thing. So when you're looking for people, look for people who have great customer service skills. We've had some of our best people have been people who waited on me in a restaurant, who were great servers, they were part of my story on Thursday about, hey, I met this person. She blew me away. She was so good, her attention to detail. And that person came to work for us and has been for a while. We got a number of those stories. So find people who are great at the customer service side of it. Then you have to obviously make sure that they can do the skills that are presented with a hearing care practitioner, because that's, hold on, the skill set, but making sure you don't cut any corners when you train people. I know in our business in New England, we had our own Beltone University training program. That was 6 weeks of classroom, which was a long period. And then they would, feather into mentoring and mirroring people and stuff like that. So it was a long time, a long process. It took them months before they get sit for a license, but we really trained them very, very well. We set themselves up for success versus some of the people out there, hire someone, train them for a week and put them out there. You can't do that. This business is much more technical and much more skill set related than that. But again, I think identifying people who have great people skills in our profession, our industry, you're dealing with mostly older adults who really like to sit down and interact with you, who need compassion and hand-holding a lot of times. Look for those people that have those skill sets. That's really the key to it. And I think you'll have some success with it. And another thing about AAA, because I was just there in Seattle and obviously I saw you out there, was it's interesting to see, the over-the-counter hearing aid folks that are trying to enter the space, most of them from Asia. In the last conference we just had, there was a area that just had a lot of Asian influence of manufacturers. And it was interesting for me to see that really very few people who were in the hearing profession, who do this a long time, had any interest in going up and talking to them, which was really funny. Because, there's OTC devices available that we have ability to get. And OTC really hasn't moved the needle in our industry. It's been a great public relations type thing to make people more aware of hearing loss. But at the end of the day, professional care is still really the most important thing. There will be people that obviously buy those devices, and that will continue. But having professional care. So I honestly, I thought it was kind of interesting to see, just kind of looking from afar, what happened with that. I'm sure you kind of noticed the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's like I alluded to earlier, I think the much, much more relevant conversation that's actually being had is around the third-party insurance, vendors, at least in this channel. OTC might end up being successful in the more direct-to-consumer channels, maybe big box. I'm hearing rumblings of people trying to, get into the pharmacy area and stuff like that. But within the professional channel, I just think that it's not fully thought out, because I think that the professional looks at it and says, okay, wait, it just feels very much like you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, where you already have like types of devices that exist that are prescription hearing aids that are roughly around the same acquisition cost as an OTC device. So it just is semantics and how you label it. It's over the counter versus a low end prescription hearing aid. And the thing that really stands out to me that, like, as time has gone on is, there will probably be a self-serve market, a do-it-yourself market. I don't really question that. I encourage that. I hope that happens, because I think that would actually grow the funnel. But I think it's becoming abundantly clear that the vast majority of people and really the true value isn't the widget, it's the person. It's just like you said, you're talking about largely a generation that sort of comes from a time where it's all interpersonal skills. They want you to know. I mean, the thing that like really resonates throughout this conversation is the story about your dad having a Rolodex, and he's got little, notes about the different types of recipes that he should be making for those people. I mean, if you can take that to heart, like, that's how you will succeed. This is a word of mouth business. People are going to come away from that and say, wow, like, this person really impressed me and amazed me, and I'm going to go and tell all my friends. And vice versa, if it's the opposite, you're going to say, this thing sucked. I had a horrible experience. And so I just look at this and I say, I think that at the heart of everything is people and the people skills, and being able to create an experience that wow people and makes them feel that they are heard. Because so much of this is they just want to be able to describe what's going on with themselves, and they want that sounding board that I think that the hearing professional provides. And that's why I think that, I've seen the numbers and the workforce data that, like, Amin Imlani and Victor Bray have put out, where it shows this giant spike in the hearing instrument specialists. The hearing instrument specialists, the audiologists, and the audiology assistants, like, these should all be working in concert in simpatico. They all complement each other beautifully. They're not each other's enemies. And so I think that if this industry can kind of rally together and figure out how do we all sort of like play a part here, because there's so many people that need this kind of help. And I'm not really sure if the solution is just, I'm going to just give people lower cost widgets, because that already exists. I think what we need is more points of access to make this person to person experience more readily available.
Couldn't agree more. And, you mentioned, how this integrates into pharmacy and how some of the, some of the direction might be going in that way. Well, listen, they're trying in pharmacy right now. And pharmacy and hearing aids have been around for a while. I have personal experience in it. Probably 10 years ago, we opened 35 CVS hearing aid locations. In 5 months, we built these tiny 6-foot carts that would, there was like a hearing aid. It was like a bathroom for an airplane. Built a audiology clinic that would roll in front of the Hallmark card section of a CVS store, and we could see patients, in privacy, which was pretty amazing. If I showed you the picture of this thing, but we sold a fair amount of hearing aids, a lot of hearing aids at regular retail prices in CVS stores with a licensed professional doing the testing. Obviously that didn't continue because they got a little greedy on their commissions and what they should take for rent. But the reality is that they went to open their own stores. They've put OTC behind glass, or an 800 number, whether it's Walgreens or CVS. They're not moving many products at all. Very, very few products. And it's because it definitely still needs someone to kind of orchestrate the whole experience in some way. It kind of bridge that gap, because we're not at the point yet that hearing aids are sexy and people want them. They're less of a handicap, which is great, which is really, really great. But people are not spending $800-900 at a CVS when the average, dollar amount of the cartridge is like $16.75. It's just not going to happen at that level. So some of the companies, whether you're Best Buy or some of these other companies that might have a professional that can at least guide people, is going to have a better, opportunity with it. And I agree with you. I think that there'll be a space for this at a large scale for people to, obviously do it. But for the vast majority of the folks that are being taken care of today, and I can tell you this from talking to a lot of patients in our offices, they just don't believe that could be that easy. They just don't. So the patients who are coming in and seen all the OTC commercials and direct consumer commercials are like, how can they do that? You see me every 3 or 4 or 5 months. You have to take the wax out. You have to clean it. You have to readjust it. How can I do that on my own? So again, there's going to be a place for some of that, but the vast majority of folks realize that it's care, it's the aftercare, it's the relationship. And as you said about my dad, those relationships go so deep. And when you just touch someone and show them you care so much, they will tell so many friends. It's amazing. It really is when you do the right things. And everybody has the ability to do that. You can't make it fake. You got to make it real. It's got to come from your heart, and you really got to do it. I'm not telling everybody to learn how to go cook so you can bring food in, but do something special for people. I remember Roy Bain years ago we did open houses with him. He used to make us go to a nursery and buy all these little plants, and every person that came in left with a plant. Well, it was just a simple little thing, and those plants would stay in their house, and the plants got bigger, and they would think of your hearing aid office when that plant got bigger. All those little things mean something. You just have to find what it is, the niche that really is your fingerprint and your touch and your marketplace that makes you unique. And that's the fun of this business, using your entrepreneurial spirit to get you there, and everybody possesses it.
This is great. I really appreciate this conversation. To kind of wrap up, let's just dive in real quick. Where do you sort of see this industry from your perspective moving across the next, call it like 3 to 5 years? What do you think are going to be the big opportunities? What are the big challenges from the way that you see things?
Yeah, I see the industry growing. I think OTC is still going to grow with it to a certain degree. We'll have a certain percentage of the business, but I think large practices will continue to to kind of own the fair share of the marketplace. So I think there'll be some more consolidation within the retail sector. I think the retailers will get smarter in how to run their businesses, as we mentioned earlier. I think the technology will continue to get stronger as well. I think there'll be one of the players and the retail manufacturing that will develop the budgets to do some kind of national advertising marketing campaign that will put them in front of the rest of the folks. I think that's what's really missing these days for a household brand name to really distinguish itself within this space. There's enough locations out there that'll happen. I think the number one thing, as you mentioned a couple times earlier, is the HBMs, the hearing benefit managers, or TPAs. They are the biggest effect, the biggest focus that is occurring within, and maybe the biggest disruptor, if you will, within the place. OTC is nothing compared to the TPAs and the HBMs because they are shaping the way that the hearing aid field is having to dispense the products and also affect the margins and how we do business. And that's really affecting the business marketplace. You have practices that have decided to be completely boutique that do not take any of those HBMs. And there's others that do 100% of it and still make a pretty good living. The question to you and to listeners out there is, what percentage of mix are you going to have in your practice to be successful? And I have my own philosophies on where that should be. But that's going to be the big piece in the next 3 to 5 years, in my opinion. The number one thing will be how you manage the managed care piece of it, because that's what's really kind of affected us the most more recently.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. I think that it's, we kind of talked a little bit about it when we were out in Seattle, is I think that it is kind of a business model issue that will have to be solved. I mean, the way I've sort of thought about this space is, we're kind of currently, or kind of the old status quo was low volume patients, high margin product. And I think that with the 3PAs, it kind of flips. It turns into more patients, but a depreciated profit margin, which to me doesn't necessarily mean anything more than we need to I think that people need to figure out, how do you make a practice conducive to seeing more people, knowing that your ROI for a patient is less, but you also need to factor in that whether you feel that those are your patients and that they came in your door through your marketing, the fact of the matter is there is definitely some depreciation of the customer acquisition cost as well. So you're not spending as much, most likely, to bring these people in. But I know that they're all so variable based upon where you live, the kinds of insurance that exists. But to me, it seems as if the insurance piece isn't going away. We talk about the silver tsunami and the baby boomers that are moving into retirement and moving into Medicare. That's going to be huge. It's like all of those people are going to become eligible for Medicare, and therefore if Medicare has a hearing benefit like it does today, a lot of people are going to be using that. And so I think that's what we got to think through.
The numbers don't lie. You get about 52% of the people who are over 65 on the Medicare Advantage program. And of those 52% of the people over 65 on the Medicare Advantage program, about 98% of them have a hearing aid benefit attached to their Medicare Advantage program. And the Medicare Advantage program is going to hit 65, 70% before you know it in the next few years. So then that means all of those people have a Medicare Advantage benefit to the hearing aids. And they're going to be looking first to that versus pursuing a marketing item that's directly sent to them or electronically sent to them about pursuing hearing aid. They're always going to want to find out what that is at the lowest cost possible. The problem is, and this is something that was instilled in me as a young person from my father, is that he said, Michael, we need to treat everyone exactly the same way who needs a hearing aid. And that was instilled in me my whole life. And that didn't change until recently. And I hate to admit it, but it's because of the way these new programs exist. Because you can't afford in your practice to give the same amount of time to a Medicare Advantage, third-party payment, fee-for-service model patient than you can with someone who's a private pay, because you're getting $600 per year as a fitting fee to fit that hearing aid to the patient. And then they get 3 allotted service checkup visits in that first year. That is a whole different philosophy on how you run your business versus a higher margin, low volume play like you mentioned earlier. So you have to really dictate where you want your business wants to be. And I tell you, late night after 11 o'clock at a hearing aid convention. That's when you learn the most about the hearing industry.
True.
My dad told me that when I was a kid. It's true. And then till wee hours in the morning, 1, 2 in the morning, that's when you learn the most about the hearing industry. And these were these deep-rooted discussions about managed care and TPAs come about, and philosophies on it. And there's no simple solution, but it's more of a philosophy of how you run your practice. And I know some real successful people who don't take any of this stuff at all and just run a private practice that is more of a boutique, higher end practice. And they do remarkably well. They just stay away from it. And then people are attracted to their practice in a certain way. And others think they have a boutique practice, but they really don't. So it's really, again, it's back to looking at yourself in the mirror, understanding what you have, and having someone maybe advise you on it, because sometimes your blinders are up, you just don't see it in your own practice, and you need someone to come tell you.
Which is, I think, a testament to someone like you, that you've always been very approachable and forthcoming with your own wisdom that you've gained, as a young person in this industry. I've always really appreciated that you're willing to engage with someone like me and say, here's what I've learned, and here's how I'm thinking about something like this. Because to your point, I don't even own a practice or anything like that, but it can be lonely in the sense that everybody is sort of heads down working on their own thing. And so I think that one of the things that really, I've mentioned this before on the podcast a bunch, but the thing that gets me really excited about kind of the time that we live in today is there's a lot of collaboration that's going on right now. There's a lot of dialogue that are in these kind of new channels that I think are really exciting. So last question, you mentioned you do the meatball reviews, best meatball that you've had around the world. And you can't say your dad's or something like that. That's cheating.
Yeah, that's cheating. You know, it's funny. It's a place you wouldn't expect, because I've had some great ones in Boston and New York and Rhode Island. Rhode Island's a mecca of food. There's a restaurant in Rhode Island called Camille's Restaurant on Federal Hill, it's a 9.456. It's incredible meatball. It's really great. But the best meatball I ever had, it's kind of funny. I was in San Diego, California.
Really?
I was with Ron and Roy Bain, and we went to this restaurant called the Godfather Restaurant, which literally had red velvet on the walls. There was a guy playing the organ when I walked in. I thought I was going to get whacked or something. And we ate dinner there, and the meatball was unbelievable. So I have to say that was the best meatball I ever had. And it was a place I didn't expect it the most. So anyways, that's the best one. But there's a lot of other great ones that are out there. But thanks for asking, Dave. I appreciate that.
That's fantastic, Mike. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Thanks for everybody who tuned in here to the end. We will chat with you next time. Cheers.
Thank you.